What's up guys, welcome back to another updated Link Evolution deck video. Counter Fairies are another linear control deck as most people should know, so this video will be shorter similar to my other control decks. I wanted to showcase this deck because it did receive some generic support as well as a new Link monster that helps it out thanks to the update. Most of the list looks similar to my old Counter Fairy video and the playstyle remains the same as before. One of the best additions we got for the deck was that the new ban list unrestricted the Solemn Counter Trap lineup. While this helps other control decks, this is probably one of the best decks to utilize them, as it can make use of guiding Ariadne, the pendulum monster. This monster set in the scale completely eliminates your life point and discard cost to activate your counter trap, so the hefty cost of half your life points or 2,000 life points from Solemn Judgment and Warning isn't a concern sometimes. As far as counter traps go, that's the only real change as most of our others remain the same. To partner up with Rebirth of Parshoth, we got a new Link monster, and as expected it is a new form of Parshoth. While I didn't get to showcase its effect in the video as much, the Celestial Knightlord Parshoth is a pretty neat option for us to summon after resolving Rebirth. Knightlord lets you search a Sanctuary in the Sky card by discarding, but if you have it on the field already you can search any fairy monster in your deck, which is more preferred. His second effect seems kind of rare, but if a fairy monster hits the graveyard from the field, he can banish it to summon a higher level fairy from your hand. Realistically, the only card you would summon here is the other Archlord Parshoth in your main deck, but hopefully you have enough counter trap defense to prevent your opponent from getting a chance to destroy your fairies. Ties of the Brethren is still essential in the deck, and summoning out the key monsters who synergize with your counter traps are always good. Bountiful Artemis is usually one of the mandatory monsters you want to maintain card advantage, while you can summon the Barrier statue and even Honest to have him float back to the hand. Just be mindful that Barrier statue can be useless against opposing light decks, which can be somewhat freakier sometimes on rank thanks to Blue Eyes and such. Pot of Extravagance is also amazing for the deck now, since we rarely want to use our extra deck anyway and it's a staple to run at 3. Since we are running Extravagance and we don't really have a need for our extra deck, we can max out on Knightlord Parshoth and run a small lineup of other useful cards. Bujinte Tsukuyomi is good for getting some decent help in fixing your hand, as this deck struggles with recovery if you expend your resources. Aside from that, the extra deck is personal preference, as you'll be banishing most of it anyway. There isn't much to highlight on replays except the ideal way you want most duels to go. Opening Extravagance and getting a monster, Ties of the Brethren, and 2 or more counter traps is usually one of the best openings you want, as it sets you up very nicely going first. Another thing to mention if it isn't obvious by now is that you always want to go first no matter what. Going second is a nightmare for this deck, as once your opponent reads your deck, they can just stop activating effects and swing over you with their strong monsters, as you'll see later on in the video. Since we have Barrier Statue in the hand, which is unfortunate, we can normal summon him and use Ties of the Brethren. Usually Bountiful Artemis, like I mentioned, is always good to summon here, but since he is in the hand I decided to skip it this time for now. Another common monster I like to summon is Honest, as it can protect Barrier Statue from being attacked by weaker monsters. But since we have Power Angel Valkyria, we can search Honest once we negate a spell, trap, or monster effect. I do mess this up slightly in this duel as I negate the opponent's monster summon instead of his effect, which prevents us from searching with Valkyria, but we are still in a good spot anyway. This deck will cause a lot of surrenders once your opponent loses their initial push, so it isn't surprising to see most matches end right after a turn like that. On the other end, some decks will have enough plays to push through your negations, so you have to be mindful of what you negate sometimes. If your opponent builds momentum and you exhaust yourself with counter traps and monsters too soon, things can go bad very quickly. As you'll see on screen, I do check my extra deck frequently for potential options to summon, but usually sticking with disruptive monsters such as Barrier Statue and monsters that can give you advantage such as Valkyria and Artemis are better to have. From here, it would be nice to draw into counter traps from here on out, since we have such a good monster lineup, especially with Ariadne in the scale. Interesting enough though, our opponent does have a card I haven't seen in ages, so it does break our Barrier Statue block unfortunately. Now that our opponent is free to special summon dark monsters, he tries to use Eternal Soul, but we still have Judgment to negate it, and thanks to Meltio we can destroy the Swordsman. Without any more counter traps, now is the time to go into Tsukuyomi and fix our hand to try and get another going first. With another negate on board, it's hard for our opponent to still try and mount the comeback, especially for Dark Magician decks since they usually require some setup to get rolling. That pretty much wraps things up though, so I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the video. I got Black Wings coming next week along with some more streams hopefully, along with some more requested decks, so stay tuned.